Hey everyone, welcome to the pod place. Wow, what a crazy couple of weeks it has been up in Queensland. It's just wild here. We have recently been hit by a cyclone, which threw my entire work week off. So, apologies for the late pod place episode last week, even though it was a very powerful one and I tried my best to get it out. I just didn't have internet, I didn't have power. Things were not working in my favor because we had a Category 2 cyclone sweep through the town and leave a lot of damage, including taking my internet and power for a long time. So it was tricky, I will say that. But we got there and everyone has been so understanding. So I appreciate it. We're back to business as usual. Um, Even though it's been a pretty crazy few weeks. This week just gone, Frankie, our little boy, our deaf son, just got his second cochlear implant implanted, and we're just waiting for switch on in a few weeks' time. So there's just been stuff happening, right? And so now I feel like I'm finally, this is my first work day back at the desk, and I've just got so much to talk to you guys about. So I thought, why not kick it off with a pod place episode? And this one actually was one that was requested by the community, my hearing parent community, around unsolicited advice. So we're going to get into that today. And this isn't unsolicited advice from a specific group of people. It's not, I'm not talking about where the advice comes from, but more how we deal with it as parents on this journey when all we are trying to do is give our kids the best possible start in life and give them all the tools and everything that they need to thrive. And it can be really hard to take this advice sometimes when we are already feeling so tapped out. And we feel like we're trying to do all the things. We're reading all the books, we're listening to all the podcasts, we're joining all the forums, and we're just trying our best. And of course, no one sees that effort. No one sees the behind the scenes that goes into actually raising a deaf and hard of hearing child and how much it is all consuming and how much we just want them to be okay. And there's so much emotion involved in that. And unfortunately, the people who are giving this advice don't know our story, they don't know our experience, and they don't know what we've been doing the last couple of years, and they don't know how many hours we've spent Googling in the very, very late hours of the evening, just trying to gain some control on this wild journey when so often we feel out of control, which is a really common feeling. And if you're feeling that, you're not alone. Even I feel that way sometimes. And that whole feeling of not being enough, not doing enough, I should be doing more. Honestly, that is the biggest comment I hear from parents that I work with is I am not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. And it's everywhere. And I want to scream. And look, I think it too. I've said it to my mum before. I call her, I'm like, I'm just not doing enough. And it just, you could always do more. We could always do more, but at the sacrifice of our own mental and physical health. And so it's really about balancing that. But what doesn't help when we're already in that burnout mode is when we are receiving advice that doesn't maybe align with what we believe and what we want to do for our kids. And it's just, in some circumstances, it's given potentially with not a lot of tact, with not a lot of grace. And so we're receiving a lot of information and a lot of advice from a lot of people who all have different views, different experiences that have shaped their perspective of how we should be raising our deaf or hard of hearing child. And that's the hardest thing, particularly in this space, because there is obviously the medical perspective, which we're dealing with, and then there's also the cultural perspective. And we're getting advice from both angles. And this is sometimes really hard to juggle because at the same time, parents are just trying to get through the day and trying to work out in themselves what they need to do to move forward, and put their best foot forward for their child. And it can become really conflicting, it can become really confusing, and it can become really overwhelming. And even though a lot of this advice may be well intended, and there is some great nuggets in a lot of this advice, particularly from deaf adults who have lived experience, and how they share their stories with us can be really powerful. It's still a lot. It's still a lot. We've actually just got to acknowledge that and lean into that, and also find ways to set boundaries around that, because there is always going to be someone who thinks the decisions you're making for your child are wrong. And sometimes I can be very passionate about arguing with you on that. And it has to come back to your inner compass. And I always talk about a true north, and I'm going to talk about that as one of my strategies in a second, but it really does come back to that inner self and being able to connect back with that and block out the noise that is not helpful, that is not productive. Because I think that's really, really important, and it's part of self-preserving and making sure we look after ourselves. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how we as parents, particularly hearing parents, on this journey where for a lot of you, the deaf world is so, so new, and it is so, so complex, and it is so, so layered. And so it can feel like you can't quite grasp it sometimes. And then you're getting all these opinions and perspectives being thrown at you, and it can be really full on. And I want to try and ease that a little bit today by giving you 5 pieces of advice, or 5 ways, if you will, that you can set boundaries around the advice that you're receiving, and also protect yourself and look after yourself. So we'll kick off with number one, because I think this is a really important and probably the most initial one that we should be doing when we're receiving advice. And that first one is, you need to be able to filter the advice that you're receiving. So consider the source that you're receiving it from. Consider their background. Consider why, looking at the why behind why they're giving you this advice. Consider their personal history and why you think they have come to you with this information. Because sometimes it could be that it's really well intended and they are so strong in this belief system that they just think that you'll understand it when they talk to you about it. But often we're still taken or caught off guard with it. And so sometimes it's good to just actually take a breath and go, okay, where is this advice stemming from? Why are they giving it to me? What is the intention? And then you're filtering it, right? Because not all advice is bad. Some of it is fantastic. And it's important that we take it all in, but then we filter out the stuff that actually isn't productive or helpful for us. Because some of it is also not very relevant to us and our journey. Because as we know, the deaf and hard of hearing cohort and world and just the experiences within this world are so diverse, and some are completely in conflict with each other. You can have two hearing parents who think very different things about how they should raise their deaf or hard of hearing child. And you can also have 2 deaf adults who have very different lived experience. And so what one thinks and believes, the other one doesn't, and vice versa. And so I think this is why I say you've got to come back to your inner compass, because you're going to get so many different perspectives in this space. And it's not sort of like it's not sort of like an if it happens, it's when it happens, because it will. And the more you practice these steps in protecting yourself, the better you will be when this advice comes at you, particularly that unproductive advice, and allowing it to just wash over you. So sometimes we're going to have to take things with a grain of salt. But when it comes to filtering, I always just say, yeah, go back to that source. Okay, what's the intention? Why are they telling me this? What is their background? What's the meaning behind this? If it's well intended, you can take it on and appreciate them and respect that they're giving this advice, and then we move on. And you may or may not take it on, depending on how you're feeling about it or whether it aligns with your vision for your child. But we don't have to bark at everyone or at everyone for just wanting to support and help us. But you really need to be able to filter that, right? So is it well intended, but it's just not aligning with your vision, and that's okay. And we can be in space with that person and respect that that's their, opinion and perspective, but not necessarily take it on. And then you might get the advice where the person is quite tactless with how they are delivering it, and there's quite a lot of criticism behind it or judgment, particularly when they don't know you on a personal level, but they feel that they have the right to talk to you in a way that's unproductive and unhelpful and hurtful. When that advice comes in, it's very important that you shut that down pretty quickly. And you can still do that respectfully, but it's not so much about what they're telling you, but how they're telling you. That is the issue there. Because again, we need to respect and appreciate everyone's perspectives. But when it's coming at you in a way where there's not that understanding and mutual respect between you, you're not going to receive it, firstly. And the intention is really blurry there as to why it is being delivered with that manner. So it's really important in that instance, and I believe you should be cutting that off and potentially asking them that, or potentially telling them that you would love to have a conversation about that in the future, but you're not feeling comfortable or safe right now in this conversation, so you're going to remove yourself. It's really, really important to start getting a script around how you deal with these interactions, because they are going to happen. And when you have a really solid moral compass and a solid vision for your child and a value and belief system that's unwavering, it really does become much easier. And I teach that. I teach a lot about the true north and your vision and things like that in my RB club. We do a lot of work around that. We just finished a 7-day challenge on that, which was such a hit, and it just really supported the families and parents in the club to just really hold that strong in their own minds so that they can now forge forward and feel like they are in control of this. And so that's really, really important to keep going back and reminding yourself of what your vision and values and beliefs are around your child and what you want for them. The last sort of piece of advice I would say is important to consider is if it's coming from a professional, a deaf adult, another hearing parent further down the track who's been in your shoes, things like that. I encourage you to consider what they're saying, particularly so it's delivered in a really well-intended way, it's respectful. It might feel a little bit, oh, I don't know whether I want to listen to this. There could be that feeling, but I always just say, consider what they're saying, take it, appreciate it, retreat, do your own research, but don't just completely knock it off because it's something you haven't heard before. I think it's really important that we consider these new, fresh perspectives. And there's a lot of wisdom we can gain from people in our lives, particularly, and I always say, but deaf adults. There's just so much we can gain. And I think we need to not be so barriered and so with the walls up that we can't allow some of this information and fresh perspectives and new advice to trickle in so we can start to maybe form an even more informed and strong foundation for what we want for our kids long term. So it's important that we filter the advice, and I think just summarizing that, we want to make sure that there's already an established mutual respect there, that we respect this person. They know us to a point that they can provide this advice. It is delivered in a respectful and well-intended way, and you can sort of see the why behind why they're delivering it. And it starts a conversation and a really, really organic and mutually respected conversation. But if we are getting the advice that's coming and it's coming in hot and hard, it's reeking of judgment, it's reeking of criticism from a person who doesn't know you and doesn't know the human you are and the values and beliefs that you hold, that's a whole nother story. And for me personally, I shut that down. I am not going to be receptive, particularly, and I get this a lot because people see me and my son, Frank, on Instagram. And there is tendency to think that they understand our life and our family and our world. And that comes with the territory. And I have to accept that I'm putting that out in a public platform. And so there are going to be opinions, but it doesn't mean I need to take them on. And it doesn't mean I need to allow them to infiltrate what I'm trying to create here. I'm so grateful for all the people who are tuning into our story and journey and providing those perspectives and insights from their unique lens. And I always take on those, but it's when there's recently I had one where I put up an anonymous questionnaire on my Instagram just to allow people to sort of ask questions that they might feel embarrassed by or they think are silly questions. There are no silly questions, by the way. And I unfortunately got quite berated on there. And it was really sad because it was coming from a place where they obviously thought they had the permission to talk about my son and the way I parent him. And that was really hurtful. And I shut that down really quickly. And I self-preserved, I protected myself and my family, and that's what I really encourage you to do as well, and not apologize for it. So that is number one. Filter the advice and consider the source and the intention behind it. Number two, which I've just spoken about briefly before, is know your true north and stick to it like glue. Do not allow anyone to change or shift or make you doubt the true north that you have set up and the vision and the goals that you have for your deaf and hard of hearing child long term. Now, to have something like this, you need to do the work, right? You need to really look at your deaf or hard of hearing child and where you want them to be in 10, 15 years and what you're working towards. We can't effectively work towards a goal that we don't know. So really getting that in your head and calling it your true north just makes it that much more meaningful. I actually even go as far as to write it on like a post-it, and I encourage families to do this on a piece of paper and chuck it somewhere you're always going to see it, and it's just there to remind you, particularly during your advocacy meetings or anything like that where it's really easy to be derailed or like emotionally compromised because you're talking about your child and things just get all crazy, crazy, crazy. So really establishing a true north, whether that's a family vision and goal and true north or a more specific to your child true north, but making sure you have that really, really clear. Like mine for Frank is so clear. And I think that's why I find it really easy to receive and filter advice that comes through, because if it doesn't align and it's not well intended, if it doesn't provide a fresh perspective that I can then complement what I'm already doing, no thanks. It's really easy. And so I really want parents to get to that point because it's so empowering and refreshing and releasing. It's really a lovely place to be. Come on, come in here with me. We can do this together. So with your true north, I think it's all about holding that power in yourself and backing yourself, yeah, and not letting something derail that. So you really want to know your goals and your vision for your child, firstly, and going back to your why. Why are you doing this? And this does come back to the research around the choices you've made, because obviously research is so important when it comes to what's been done in the past that hasn't worked. You know, historically, certain methods have been used that have been proven not to work. And now it's very much that this method works. And so I think really going back to the research and the why and that data can be really helpful because it's so black and white. It's not gray, and that really helps. That helps me, particularly. But it also helps with that validation and just being like, yes, this is our goal and this is why. And if there's anyone there who may be uneducated or unaware throwing stuff at you, you can just allow that to fall to the side because they haven't done the work you have done to get to where you are. So yeah, it's a bit about drowning out the noise and sticking to your true north, but also allowing fresh perspectives in. Again, it's just we have to self-preserve here because this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And over the 20, 25, 50 years that you are parenting your child, yes, 50 years, because I spoke to my mum the other day and she's like, I don't ever feel like I've stopped being a parent. I still am a parent to all of you. And my brother is now 44. So that just tells you that, right? But this is a long haul. We're going to deal with a lot of people questioning our decisions. And so I think really knowing the why behind your goals and vision and having the research and the experiences that you've listened to and engaged in to build that foundation is going to help so much when you start to receive this advice. So getting that really clear in your head, gaining clarity around that, Your true north is key. So that's number 2. Number 3, now this, I've spoken a little bit about this in like my socials and with people in workshops and webinars and all that jazz. But this is something that I live by, and this is not my theory. I got this from a podcaster called Mel Robbins, and I'm sure some of you know her. I really love her stuff, and she's very no BS, which is all, what I'm about. She's very authentic. But she talks about this thing called the let them theory. And I really, really love it because it's a bit of a game changer in regards to mindset, and it can be a really good sort of circuit breaker if you're getting into those spiraling thoughts or the emotion is taking over. Someone's given you or tried to give you advice that may not be well delivered, well intended, and it can spark a rage in you, it can spark emotion in you, and you can just start to spiral. I like this let them theory because basically the crux of it is, instead of engaging with every piece of unsolicited advice, every comment coming through, if you're on socials, every negative opinion that's thrown on your posts or whatever it might be, you just stop and you say, let them do it. Let them write the mean review. Let them speak to you in that inconsiderate, critical way. Let them judge and believe that they know your world and your family and what you are doing for your child. Let them do what they want. Just let them. Let them think that you're doing it all wrong because that's their perspective, but that's not your story. Let them have their opinions. They are more than entitled to their opinions, but you're not responsible for changing that. That's outside your scope of what you need to be focusing on. So just let them talk, let them judge, let them. It's like it is the most releasing mindset, because the minute we just say, let them, we don't have to justify or defend our choices or feel like we're in this complete cycle of spiraling thoughts where we start to get so emotional and we then get a bit irrational, and then we start second guessing everything we're doing because of this one person or this one piece of advice. When it is being delivered in a way that is not productive, that is not helpful, that is not useful, just let them. And this could be that you just let them, and this is going to bring me into my next technique where you just smile and nod, or you don't make a comment. You just stay silent. And you just let them, and then you move on with your life because you have got a mission. You are on a mission. You've got stuff to do. We are very busy people. And so I love, love, love that theory. And honestly, you can transfer that into basically anything. And I think it's important to know that with that, it doesn't mean that we're just completely disregarding any fresh information and that, like, no, this is mine, black and white, and you're going to say this, I'm going to completely ignore you. But it is, again, coming back to that. Is this well-intended? Is this supportive? Is this helpful? No, okay, I'm going to just let them do what they do, and I'm going to do what I do. Isn't it powerful? I know. Anyway, just love it. Mel Robbins, look her up. She's fantastic. I could listen to her all day. Okay, number 4, the smile and ignore technique. Well, it's not, and you might be like, I can't smile at that, and that's fine. But again, sometimes it is just about allowing people to say their piece. And really, because we are so strong in our true north, we can not let that penetrate the deeper parts of ourselves. And we can just smile and nod or respect the fact that that's their opinion. And this is definitely good for those perspectives where, again, they might be well-intended and well-delivered, but they don't align with what we're doing and what we want and what we think is best for our child. But we also don't want to criticize them or burn a bridge there because we know that they're meaning well and they're just wanting to help. And so this can be a really nice technique, right? Sometimes it is just about nodding and maybe even saying something like, oh, I never thought about that. Thank you for sharing. And just allowing that to sit and then moving on. Sometimes not every comment needs a response. I remember I was at a park recently and an older lady came up and made some comments about Frankie and calling him different names that I probably would, quite archaic words that we would use. We wouldn't use them in this day and age. But instead, I just sort of looked at her and sort of gave her a little nod, and then we moved away. I didn't engage in the conversation. I didn't advocate or educate in that situation because I was preserving. I wasn't in the mood. I didn't have the energy for it. And I realized it wasn't actually going to impact or contribute to Frank's long-term um, success and outcomes. And I thought, yeah, look, I'm going to let this one go. And so I just sort of gave her a nod and off we went. And so I think that's okay sometimes, because we have to really lean into the fact that not everyone's going to get our kids and they're all going to have their assumptions and they're all going to think they know. And that's okay. We just have to, in some ways, if it's well intended, if it's being delivered in that way that's just trying to be nice, you just let it go. Another thing you can do is change the topic. That's a good one to really segue into something new, just to get away from that discussion, because it can be triggering as much as we don't want it to be. It can be hard to then continue talking about something that we really don't agree with or we don't like, or it's making us feel uncomfortable. So I think that's really, really important. I think a key one for here too is that whole question, oh, can they lip read? Oh man, I get that. I get them a lot in the medical field when I'm at hospital. Can he lip read? And I think I could go into a whole monologue about lip reading with these people, but I don't. I just go, no, no, he can't. Because I don't want them to see that as an option. It's not fair that then they go, great, well, I don't need to put any effort in. But I also am not going to bark down at them and be like, what? How could you think this in that moment? Because it's not helpful for anyone. And I actually don't have the energy, nor do I think it's the right place to be saying that when we're in the middle of going into like an appointment or something. So I just go, no, shuts it down respectfully. And then they also know not to use that as their strategy for communicating with him. So that's a really good one as well. And I would say that one's for more that advice that's maybe a bit annoying, but harmless and well intended. Okay, so one, two, three, four. And number five is again that sort of mindset thing, but it comes back to also building a bit of a community and a village around you, because this just allows you to have an outlet for when you're having these really hard moments and you might have received some advice that's just making you feel really crappy. And so you just need to retreat, protect yourself, and turn to those who get it. Turn to those who get it, which for us as parents and hearing parents on the journey is other hearing parents. And then for deaf parents on the journey raising deaf kids, it's other deaf parents on the journey raising deaf kids. Like we need to find our little communities within our community, right? And I know for us in the RB Club, this is my big thing, is that it's a really safe and sacred place for families raising deaf and hard of hearing kids bilingually who are really passionate about a signed and spoken language, because it's a really hard thing sometimes to go out into those public forums where there is a lot of different perspectives, and we have parents who believe in the oral approach and only wanting to talk about that and promote that in these forums. And then we've also got whole other different perspectives that are flying into these forums and communities. And I really wanted to create something sacred to that very specific niche of hearing parents raising these bilingual kids, still really vulnerable on the journey because they don't know the deaf world in length, but they just need somewhere they can talk, discuss, troubleshoot, vent, just a place where they can feel safe. And that is why RB Club exists. And I think that that's something we need to really start to find for ourselves on the journey in whatever sort of community we're looking for. Find your people. And I think do less of trying to justify yourself to those who don't get it. And I think that's really important because it can sometimes feel like we need to justify, or we really want to change the perspective or shift the mindset of someone who doesn't agree with what we do. But what we're doing is we're just burning energy, because if they really feel strongly about something, they're not going to shift it. And so we need to retreat to the people who get it, and we can be like, hey, this just happened. I'm feeling really weird about it. What are your thoughts? Has this happened to you? And just to get that advice and that validation and acknowledgement is so important. So I think it's really important to have your village in all of this, particularly when you are receiving that unsolicited advice. I've got people that I have on speed dial that I call if I'm feeling particularly sensitive, or I'm feeling like something's hit and hit a nerve and I'd like to talk it through. I have those people. And I think that's really important that we all have those people in our life. And that's always going to be different. That might be your family, but it may not be. It may actually be other parents of deaf kids. And I think that's really critical to have that and that collective community and that trust as well. So they are my five beautiful, powerful strategies for managing unsolicited advice and managing that advice that doesn't serve us. I really hope you got something out of that today. These are all ones that I use regularly and have really helped me to get to a point where I can feel very strong in my belief system and things do not shake me the way they used to shake me. And I really would love, that's my big goal here, is to create parent advocates and strong, empowered parents who feel that way too. That's really important because what that does is that ripples and transfers onto our kids so that they also feel safe, protected, and like they can go out in the world and hold their own and hold their power. And so I think it all definitely stems back to that. Thank you so much for joining me on this solo episode today, guys. It's been so lovely. It's nice to get back into it. I feel like it's been a bit of a hiatus. That interview I did with Kim last week, which was beautiful, my first deaf parent, that was a while ago now. So I feel like it's nice to get back into it. And these episodes will be coming out fortnightly. They were weekly, but unfortunately, it just wasn't able to sustain it with my current workload. So fortnightly, you should expect these to come out. And a huge thank you again to Expression Australia for their Auslan interpretations that they provide for each episode. You guys are amazing. You can connect and link in with all the things I've mentioned today, the RB Club and Expression Australia and any other, my socials, all of that down in the show notes. So please enjoy and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Hey everyone, welcome to